The red giant's surface began its final expansion on the morning of the 47th day of operations. HFY stood in the command center of the human flagship, watching as her homeworld's ancient sun swelled visibly against the star field. According to the stellar models, they had perhaps 18 hours before the expanding solar atmosphere would reach Caloria's orbit. 18 hours to evacuate the final 3 million Calorians still on the planet's surface. "Status report," Captain Santos called out across the command center. "Pod production lines are at maximum output," Dr. Patterson responded from her engineering station. "We're launching completed evacuation pods every 6 minutes from all 3 fabrication centers." "Transport coordination?" Santos continued. "Independent vessels are maintaining steady pickup schedules at the designated rally points," Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez reported. "The Calorian refugee fleet is performing better than projected. Their pod pilots are getting the hang of hyperspace navigation remarkably quickly." Ambassador Chen appeared at HFY's side, carrying 2 steaming cups of the hot beverage humans called coffee. "How are you holding up?" HFY accepted the cup gratefully, though her hands trembled slightly. "Terrified and amazed in equal measure. 3 days ago, I was certain we would lose at least 1 million people. Now it looks like we might actually save everyone." "Might being the operative word," Chen said quietly. "The numbers are still tight." They both knew the mathematics. At current production and launch rates, the evacuation would be completed with perhaps 2 hours to spare before the stellar expansion reached critical levels. There was no room for major equipment failures, weather delays, or any of the 1,000 other things that could go wrong in a massive operation like this. A communication alert drew their attention to the main display, where an incoming transmission was requesting priority access. Captain Santos accepted the call, and the stern face of Counselor Thranks appeared on screen. "Captain Santos, I am calling to express the Galactic Council's concern about your operation in the Calorian system." Santos's expression remained professionally neutral. "What specific concerns, Counselor?" "Our long-range sensors detect massive industrial activity and what appears to be unauthorized mining operations in Council-protected space. The Calorian system falls under galactic heritage preservation protocols due to its unique stellar evolution profile." HFY felt her bioluminescence flicker with anger. "Counselor Thranks, with respect, my people are facing extinction. Heritage preservation protocols seem somewhat irrelevant under the circumstances. Ambassador, I understand the emotional aspects of your situation, but galactic law is quite clear. The Council cannot permit unauthorized industrial operations, regardless of the underlying motivation." Captain Santos stepped forward. "Counselor, are you ordering us to cease rescue operations?" Thranks's compound eyes reflected the command center's lights as he consulted his neural interface. "I am informing you that the Vorthon Empire has dispatched a patrol fleet to investigate the unauthorized activities. They will arrive in approximately 12 hours and will expect full compliance with galactic law. 12 hours. 6 hours before the evacuation was scheduled to complete." "Understood, Counselor," Santos said calmly. "We'll be sure to give them our full cooperation." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Finally, Rodriguez spoke up. "Captain, if the Vorthons arrive with a full patrol fleet, they'll have enough firepower to shut down our entire operation," Santos finished. "I know." HFY felt despair settling over her like a physical weight. So close. They had come so close to saving everyone, and now galactic politics was going to doom the final millions of her people. "There is one option," Ambassador Chen said quietly. Santos turned to look at her. "I'm listening." "The Vorthons are coming to investigate unauthorized industrial operations. What if there were no industrial operations to investigate when they arrived?" "You're suggesting we pack up and leave?" Rodriguez asked incredulously. With 3 million people still on the surface? No, Chen said, her expression growing determined. I'm suggesting we accelerate the timeline. Dr. Patterson looked up from her engineering displays. Ambassador, we're already running production at maximum capacity. The fabrication units literally cannot operate any faster without risking catastrophic failures. Then we don't use the fabrication units for the final phase, Chen replied. She activated a holographic display showing the current fleet positions. How many human ships do we have in the system right now? Santos consulted his tactical display. 67 vessels from Earth, plus 19 independent ships that have joined the operation. Passenger capacity? Assuming emergency overcrowding protocols, maybe 400,000 people total. That leaves us short by 2.6 million, HFY said. Chen manipulated the display to show a wider view of the local galactic region. What about the colony ships at the refugee processing centers? Those are already at capacity with evacuees from the earlier phases, Rodriguez pointed out. Not their passenger compartments, their cargo holds. The command center fell silent as the implications of Chen's suggestion sank in. Dr. Patterson was the first to speak. Ambassador, cargo holds aren't equipped with life support systems for biological passengers, and the hyperspace journey to the nearest safe worlds would take at least 6 hours. So we install temporary life support, Chen said simply. We take every portable life support unit we can find, load them into the cargo holds of every available ship, and transport people in the most basic possible conditions. It won't be comfortable, but it will get them off the planet. Captain Santos studied the projections for a long moment. It would be incredibly dangerous. Cargo holds aren't designed for passenger transport. If one of those temporary life support systems fails during hyperspace transit, people die, Chen acknowledged. But if we don't try, 3 million people die anyway. At least this way, we're giving them a chance. Rodriguez was already running calculations on his engineering console. If we strip life support units from non-essential areas of every ship in the fleet, yes, we could probably support basic atmospheric needs for several million people for 6 to 8 hours. What about the pods that are still being manufactured? HFY asked. We keep those running until the Vorthons arrive, or the star expansion reaches critical levels, whichever comes first, Santos decided. Every pod that launches is another dozen people we don't have to cram into cargo holds. Over the following hours, HFY watched the humans implement the most improvised, large-scale rescue operation she had ever witnessed. Cargo holds throughout the fleet were hastily converted into temporary passenger compartments. Portable life support units were salvaged from storage areas, maintenance bays, and even personal quarters. Engineering teams worked frantically to install emergency atmospheric systems in spaces that had never been designed to support biological life. On Caloria's surface, the evacuation took on a different character. Instead of the orderly processing centers that had characterized the earlier phases, massive crowds gathered at improvised pickup points. Human shuttle pilots made rapid back-and-forth flights, loading as many Calorians as their craft could possibly carry. It looks like chaos, HFY observed, watching the surface operations on the main display. Organized chaos, Santos corrected. There's a difference. The stellar expansion reached the critical threshold at 1437 station time. The red giant's outer atmosphere now extended past the orbit of the innermost planet, and Caloria itself was beginning to experience the first effects of the increased radiation and gravitational stress. Surface temperature is rising rapidly, Dr. Patterson reported. The fabrication centers are beginning to shut down due to thermal overload. Final pod count? Last one launched 6 minutes ago. Total pod production 2,147 units, carrying approximately 34,164 people. Santos nodded grimly. That leaves roughly 2.7 million still on the surface. All ships, begin final pickup operations immediately. What followed was 12 hours of the most intense rescue operations HFY had ever witnessed. Human ships descended through increasingly dangerous atmospheric conditions to collect the last evacuees. Cargo holds filled with frightened but grateful Calorians, packed into spaces barely adequate for their biological needs, but sufficient to keep them alive during the journey to safety. The Vorthan patrol fleet arrived just as the final human transport lifted off from Caloria's surface. Unknown vessels. This is Fleet Commander Zorax of the Vorthan Imperial Navy, came the transmission. You are operating in violation of Galactic Council preservation protocols. Identify yourselves and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Captain Santos responded calmly. Fleet Commander, this is Captain Santos of the Earth Unified Fleet. We are completing humanitarian rescue operations in the Calorian system. Our sensors detect no industrial operations, Zorax replied, and Zexhai could hear the confusion in his voice. The system appears to contain only natural stellar phenomena and evacuation vessels. That's correct, Commander. The evacuation operation has concluded. All Calorian citizens have been successfully relocated to safe systems. There was a long pause in the communications. Finally, Zorax spoke again. Captain Santos, our intelligence reports indicated massive unauthorized industrial operations in this system. There were temporary manufacturing facilities to support the evacuation effort, Santos confirmed. Those facilities were removed when the operation concluded. Removed. Our projections indicated such an evacuation would require several more days to complete. We accelerated the timeline. Another pause. Captain, may I ask why you undertook this operation? The Galactic Council voted not to authorize intervention in the Calorian situation. Santos glanced at Zexhai before responding. Commander, 47 million people were about to die. The Council's authorization seemed less important than saving their lives. The final transmission from the Vorthan fleet came an hour later, after their sensors had confirmed that the Calorian homeworld was indeed uninhabitable and that the evacuation had been completed. Captain Santos, Fleet Commander Zorax, I am instructed to inform you that the Vorthan Empire will be filing a formal complaint about unauthorized activities in Council space. Understood, Commander. I am also instructed to inform you that the complaint will note that no lasting damage was done to the stellar system, and that the unauthorized activities ceased before our arrival. Santos smiled slightly. Understood, Commander. Will there be anything else? No, Captain. Safe travels. As the Vorthan fleet departed, leaving the humans alone in the expanding stellar system, Ambassador Chen joined Zexhai at the observation viewport. Together, they watched the red giant continue its inexorable expansion, its surface already beginning to envelop the orbit where Caloria had circled for millennia. 47,212,000 people, Chen said quietly. What? The final count. We evacuated every single living being on your planet. Even managed to save most of your planetary cultural archives and genetic samples for future terraforming efforts. Zexhai felt tears gathering in her eyes as the magnitude of what the humans had accomplished finally sank in. An entire civilization. You saved an entire civilization. We helped save it, Chen corrected. Your people did most of the work themselves, once we gave them the tools and opportunity. Over the following months, Zexhai would travel throughout human space, visiting the refugee processing centers where her people were being helped to establish new homes on 7 different worlds. She would observe the patient work of human teachers helping Calorian children adapt to new environments, human engineers working with Calorian scientists to preserve their technological knowledge, human farmers teaching her people to cultivate alien soils. The major galactic powers took notice. The synthetic collective began studying human decision-making processes, trying to understand how such an inefficient approach to problem-solving could produce such effective results. The Altrurian Federation invited human philosophers to debate their concepts of moral obligation, Even the Vorthan Empire quietly approached Earth about potential military cooperation agreements. But perhaps the most significant change was in the Galactic Council itself. When the next crisis emerged, a plague outbreak in the Rimian system, the Council voted unanimously to authorize immediate intervention. The authorization specifically cited the Calorian precedent and included provisions for emergency action when sentient life was at risk. More importantly, they asked the humans to coordinate the response. Ambassador Chen often said that the Calorian rescue had changed humanity's place in the galaxy, not because it proved humans were powerful, but because it proved they were reliable. When something needed to be done, especially something difficult and dangerous with no obvious reward, other species had learned they could count on humanity to find a way. The galaxy is full of species that can calculate whether something is worth doing, Chen would explain to new human diplomats. What makes us valuable is that we're willing to do things that are worth doing, whether they're profitable or not. The red giant that had been Caloria's son continued to expand for several more months before settling into its new configuration as a bloated stellar remnant. In the deep infrared spectrum, sensitive instruments could still detect the fading thermal signature of the planet that had once orbited there, slowly cooling as it drifted through interstellar space. But by then, the Calorian civilization was thriving on 7 new worlds, their culture preserved, and their people safe among the stars. And throughout the galaxy, when other species faced seemingly impossible crises, they knew exactly who to call. The species that had answered when everyone else turned away. The species that had proven that sometimes the most important question wasn't whether something could be done, but whether it should be done. The species that had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to reach for the stars.